a set of secure digital systems which are interoperable and form the foundation for a digital economy. The push for DPI has been considered a cornerstone of India's leadership of the G20. Last week, after a meeting of G20 ministers on digital economy, India's IT Minister Ashwini Vaishnav announced that an absolute consensus, quote unquote, was reached on the concept of the DPI and other issues. Prime Minister Modi had also underlined the importance of DPI as well. The United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, has been a knowledge partner in these conversations, and Robert Opp, Chief Digital Officer of the UNDP, who was part of all these negotiations, he joins us from New York. Thank you so much, Robert, for joining us. While we say a consensus has been reached over the need for DPI and an agreement on the description of it, there are still key issues that need to be addressed. What, according to you, are the key challenges, knowledge gaps that need to be addressed and we need to overcome?
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me on. And just before I jump to that, I do want to just note the significance of the consensus here, because this is really the first time that such a high-profile group of countries has come to a kind of common alignment around what is actually digital public infrastructure. So let's not underestimate the value of that. But to answer your question about what are the challenges, of course, we have many challenges that are still ahead in terms of how we pull this field of digital public infrastructure thinking and approach together. And one of it is just making sure that countries have a basic idea of what the approach can be. Although a lot of people are aware of the work that India and other countries have done to pioneer digital public infrastructure, just getting the connections of understanding and the basic approach down is not something that we can take for granted and that countries can easily find out. So an information gap around that. And then, of course, it's always important for us, part of the concept around digital public infrastructure is to make sure that technology is aligned with what people need in terms of the right governance setup, the right institutions that can support it, the right approach so that digital public infrastructure stays people-centered. It is able to really bring people in, so digital inclusion, and really work toward a prosperous society and economy.
Well, this whole push, Robert, has been an essential part of India's G20 leadership. What are the key lessons from a global standpoint from the India experience?
So I think you're right. And I just want to kind of pause there and say what India's presidency has done in terms of leading this discussion is really to elevate this to a global stage and say, this is something that's worked for us as an approach, and how might we bring in others and work on this together? And so one of the kinds of things that we need to look at is really what are the hard-won lessons learned out of countries like India and others that have really pioneered these approaches. And what we sort of are working toward is understanding what are the key steps that need to be done here. And one of them is really being clear from the beginning what it is that you're trying to achieve. So kind of looking at where's the outlook of where we need to go. The other one is really understanding properly how to build the right technology layers, or not even build necessarily. We're at a point now where countries are able to share their technology approaches when they're open sourced and things like that. So where might I kind of gather the pieces of my digital public infrastructure? And then really importantly, how do I build the institutions around it to make sure that it's really properly implemented with the right protections and laws and so on?
Well, very interesting. One of the key aspects are some of the publications that the UNDP has come up with for filling knowledge gaps, right?
The Indian presidency has released 2 seminal publications as part of the work of the G20, and UNDP has been honored to support them with that. So one of them is a playbook on the DPI approach, which is really getting to the heart of what we've been discussing, which is what do we know now about the lessons learned on the sort of the steps that a country needs to take in order to really put the right plan, the right technology, and the right institutions in place. The second publication that we're looking at, or that was released as part of the Indian presidency, is a compendium of digital public infrastructure examples across the 17 SDGs. We have 50 different examples of the kinds of systems that have been implemented around the world that are showing some results, positive results when it comes to the sustainable development goals.
Thank you so much, Robert, for sharing those thoughts. Obviously, it's a work in progress in terms of building a digital public infrastructure in several countries around the world. India, of course, leading that G20 conversation on. That's all we have time for on the show. The news continues here on NDTV.